Welcome back. It's Serena Hussein here on Life Vocabulary. We're talking about the importance of having boundaries in relationships with a bit of inspiration from Dr. Brené Brown. Thank you so much for tuning in to a talk, podcast, whatever you want to call it, on self and social awareness. I guess this one is a lot more about the self, but it's about relationships as well. So we will blur those lines a little bit. I hope you're well. Thank you so much for tuning in. New subscribers, current ones, and if you're new, I hope you enjoy this little talk that I'm going to give. And if you're really enjoying it, you know what to do. Give me a like now. It's only been like 30 seconds. You can take it away later. I won't mind. So the importance of having boundaries in relationships. Let me take on something I hear a lot, and you probably hear it a lot, and you may be one of those people who says this or sort of thinks this way or loves this way. People who love to love hard. They actually say it. I love hard. They go all in. Or there's people who can't discern whether someone's actually love bombing them. I'll talk about this. I'll expand on that. Or actually, sincerely loving them. Boundaries can get blurred because it feels so good, but it's just a momentary thing. It's just momentary in nature. Or people just allow things to slide because of someone being family or even a spouse. Long-term friends and best friends end up getting a pass, and we grow frustrated because we let things slide, giving people the room to overstep or understep, as the case may be, and grow frustrated to a dysfunctional level, or even have it get in the way of our core natures, which will not only be to love and be joyous, but to have empathy and compassion. And this is what Brené Brown says repeatedly in her writing and talks. Truly compassionate people have boundaries. She says, we can't sustain empathy and compassion without boundaries. We can't sustain being loving, is what I'm thinking. Truly loving and understanding with ourselves and others, because without boundaries, I'm visualizing a fast flowing river without dams, just becoming reckless and damaging. Whereas a boundary checks someone, and the lack of a boundary could cause us to overflow in our reactions to them, spoiling our own state as well in the process. So let's get into this. I gave you a little overview. How did that sound? If you like the sound of where I'm going with this, then you know what to do. Give me a little like. And if you haven't subscribed already, press that button. Let's get into this. Because I feel like there's quite a few areas to do with self and relationships, especially intimacy, that I'd love to cover. So boundaries in relationships. People who love really hard. I often wonder, the ones who really love hard, who go all in, I wonder about their attachment pattern. I sound like I'm mocking and I'm really judgy, but if you know who I am, then you know I can just be a little bit, I don't know, snarky. Maybe it's just the humour of where I'm from. I don't know. But I don't mean this in any judgment, because I've been there. I've done it. Man, have I been there. Made all kinds of mistakes, and been, I would say, on the receiving end as well. So this is all without judgment. No one's had a perfect kind of experience, and we all have our own attachment patterns and styles. I've talked about kind of interdependent, healthy relationships rather than very codependent or the opposite, being quite removed from each other. And attachment patterns, they came from this I guess model of attachment. It was from Dr. John Bowlby, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's something that I looked into a great deal before adopting my daughter, and I looked at all kinds of research around attachment theory and also attachment parenting and therapy, and I kind of created my own kind of way. Actually, not my own way, it kind of informed how I would even play with my daughter in those sort of initial years of bonding and connection when she was very young. But we all have these attachment patterns based on our very early sort of experiences of, having a significant caregiver, or actually the absence of a significant caregiver. Let's just say that if you're early, as a very brief example, so I can get into this loving hard example, a very early, let's just say childhood example, is that you have a parent or a significant kind of carer to be quite avoidant, not really very present. It can make you quite anxious. So according to these sort of studies, and the theory is that you become anxious and you're forever in anticipation of connection. So it can make you quite anxious and clingy. But you see, the more you express your need for attention, the further removed that sort of significant person gets. So later on in life, that attachment pattern just keeps going on if you don't address it, let's just say, and you end up sort of not just attracting partners, but let's just say you gravitate towards them because that's your blueprint, that's what you're used to, that's what love is for you. And so you end up exploring options with people who are very familiar in terms of their dynamic with you, to your attachment pattern, to your early life sort of attachment experience. So you could end up getting into an avoidant kind of attachment pattern where you avoid intimacy and connection. So sometimes I wonder, when those ones who really love hard, I wonder, are they the type who are anxious and need to go all in and just love really hard indiscriminately without boundaries because maybe something's driving them, maybe it's insecurity, and they feel like they really need to lock it down? But not just that, I think they want to capture the attention of the other in quite an innocent way, but it can, if you're not aware, if you're not conscious, it can actually end up being a little bit, she says, generalizing, destructive. So I wonder, because to love hard means that it's without any kind of regulation, and I think that love doesn't become boring when it's regulated. It just becomes more aware and deeper, and there's more depth and meaning to it. It doesn't mean it becomes a study or an analysis. It can still be spontaneous, but I guess it comes back to our own state with ourselves rather than it having to be a study, or it doesn't start with the intimacy and the exchange we're having with someone else. It actually starts with us first. And so when we have these boundaries and we are practicing having boundaries with others, it actually informs how we are with others then. It's almost like if you have your internal, let's just say, dams set up, or you're forever practicing having boundaries with others in all your kinds of relationships, what ends up happening is you sort of get this sort of inner regulation, almost this inner awareness becomes more clearer. There's more clarity around it. The signals that you need to hear from within come, and so you know how to respond rather than react. You know where a dam might need to be a little bit higher or wider with some, and perhaps not so much with others. So what ends up happening is that maybe then someone enters your life and you feel, you know what, I can be less filtered with you. There's more of a kind of, I don't know, because I guess you do still have to have some form of boundary. You can't just be love hard and just go over the top with someone, because again, it's that very kind of momentary euphoric feeling. I think there's that separation, healthy separation that you have with someone. So I actually don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of, I don't like saying wall, but a little bit of a boundary, in terms of you're still allowing the other person to be them. There's some space between you. So there's that healthy space, and then you need a healthy boundary. So there, I got there in the end. And then you have this love bombing thing. I hope I addressed that before I just moved on to love bombing. You know, we talked about attachment patterns. I just mentioned attachment patterns. I just mentioned how you've got to get more aware within and get better practiced and discerning about, you know, how much space you need to have between others. And then you've got people who love bomb. And love bomb is actually a term that they use when we're talking about relationships with narcissists. Actually, people having experienced relationships with others who have narcissist, I think it's called narcissist personality disorder. So it's not just talking about narcissism in terms of just sort of characteristics. And what's often the case is when you first meet a narcissist, let's just say, and you don't know that about them, and often they don't know themselves, right? They love bomb you, and that is make you the center of their universe. But that period of time doesn't last. And what happens is it's very, very manipulative, and it's sort of almost like, it can seem like it's just a honeymoon period. So you've got how to know, again, in order to be careful when kind of stepping into a situation with somebody, you've got to be well practiced at boundaries. I'm actually going to be a lot more cautious, having experienced some pretty awful relationships in my past. Not skeptical, but very aware of anyone who wants to love bomb or love hard. It's actually a flag for me, because it almost feels a little bit too indiscriminate. And what I feel is, if I'm being discerning about you, why aren't you? And that means I'm caring for myself. So I have that self-care and self-awareness, where I'm going to be not calculated, but I'm regulated, in the sense that I'm kind of grounded. Now, if you're going to be all over me and all over the place, I'm going to be a little bit concerned, because how can you regulate that? How can you sustain it, more importantly? And again, Brené Brown talks about this. Without boundaries, you can't sustain love and empathy and compassion at all. So that's why I think it's really important to be very aware of situations where people want to really get into your life soon, quickly and fast. And if you allow it, because for some reason rom-coms or other sort of stories tell us that is love, you know, to be so committed and dedicating, go all in. Again, boundaries. It takes practice, but you know, you preserve yourself so much more. And what happens is, if you're, you know, just exercising boundaries, not just in terms of romance and that kind of intimacy, but also in your sort of circle of family and friends, you may find that your circle becomes a lot smaller. However, your capacity to have empathy and understanding for yourself and others grows bigger. So again, whilst your circle may become a lot smaller, your capacity to have empathy and understanding grows way bigger, especially with the ones you have to be less filtered with. In fact, you become more joyous and it feels more glorious. Give this a like if you have really dug what I've been talking about. I really appreciate that. Drop me a comment. Let me know which part resonated with you the most, because I feel like all of us have found ourselves on one side or the other at some stage in our lives, because this is kind of the story of human existence, right? So I found that once I started to become more aware of the need for boundaries, what happens, as Brené Brown says, you start to cut people slack, because why are you expecting so much from others? It's almost like I think she says something along the lines of, let's just accept that they're doing their best, even if you have let's just say, even if they're not doing their best. But you almost feel like you're off the hook from having to try so hard. So yeah, let's just put a boundary. Someone's showing you what their limit is, and therefore cap it right there. So I found that the more I did this, yes, the smaller my circle got, especially over the last 5 years. I went through some big life changes, and what may have seemed to a lot of them that they may have put some distance between me and them in terms of friendships or associations. In fact, it was something that I wanted it. It sounded really petty. But no, if I'm absolutely honest, I think when you're putting boundaries in place, it doesn't always require a big speech. Sometimes you may have to do a little bit of a communication exercise. But I did find, and I have found, that since I've been doing this in sort of small stages and ways, the more I've grown with my own awareness, and I'm sure I've got more, a long way to go. I'm not there. There's no such thing as there yet. But I do believe that I've done a fair bit of work. And what's happened is, yes, your circle does grow super small, but the ones you're have to be less filtered with, and you can be more of yourself with, and less guarded with, you actually end up having more joy and presence available to you to really have quality moments. And I have that with Cub, my daughter, who's nearly 8, and I have that with very key people that mean a lot to me. So it's not an easy process, but it's a very worthwhile one, especially if you have had, let's say, negative, very harmful experiences with others who have not respected your boundaries, or whom you should have had boundaries with and you just weren't aware, and you didn't have boundaries for them, and you kind of got caught up in a real storm, and it could have been for a length of time. So this boundary conversation it's so crucial. It's about preserving ourselves, but also being more sustainable, not in the environmental sense, but learning actually how we can sustain that wonderful stuff that we all really need more of, which is empathy and compassion, especially for ourselves. I really hope you got a lot from this short commentary piece from me, Serena Hussein, on my Life Vocabulary podcast / platform, whatever you want to call it. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and you know what to do. Give this a like and definitely subscribe. I will be back with weekly drops. As ever, you'll hear from me soon. Keep growing in your capacity to have grey area conversations and questioning more, and most definitely thinking more broadly about self and social awareness, and how there's so much more in between the polarized positions that we are encouraged to take. And that's what Life Vocabulary is all about since I started this platform in 2016. So thank you very much for joining me, coming by. Say hi in the comments, and you know what to do. Connect with me on my socials. I'd love to sort of continue the conversation. That's the point of this. Much love. I'm Serena Hussein, and I'll be back very soon.